I'm Sarah Mitchell, a paramedic with 12 years of experience. I've seen it all, from horrific car accidents to sudden heart attacks, even delivering a baby on the side of a highway. But nothing prepared me for what happened at Cedar Hollow, a gated community in suburban Raleigh, North Carolina. A 76-year-old woman, Margaret Foster, was dying of a heart attack, and I was just meters away, ready to save her, until a homeowners association security guard, Derek Holt, tossed me for trespassing. She didn't make it, and now the entire HOA board is being sued for wrongful death. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video. That morning started like any other for me. Sarah Mitchell, 38, a seasoned paramedic who stays calm under pressure. I've worked over a decade at Raleigh Metro EMS, a station in a lively suburban town not far from downtown Raleigh. That shift had been long, 12 hours of nonstop emergency calls, a kid with a broken arm, an elderly man who fell downstairs. I was sitting in the ambulance parking area, sipping cold coffee, joking with my partner Ethan Carter that we deserved some peace until the end of the shift. "It'll probably be quiet," Ethan said, smirking. I laughed, but this job is always full of surprises. Then the radio crackled, the dispatcher's voice urgent. "Unit 14, 911 at Cedar Hollow, House 124. Female, 76, suspected heart attack. Caller reports victim is cyanotic. Priority 1. Adrenaline surged. I knew this was life or death. A heart attack requires immediate action. If CPR doesn't start within 4 minutes, survival odds drop to 10%. Ethan and I grabbed our medical bags, jumped into the ambulance, and tore down the road, sirens blaring, red lights flashing. Cedar Hollow was about 10 minutes from the station, a fancy gated community I'd been to a few times for minor calls like chest pain or falls. The gate always opened for ambulances, so I wasn't worried. I was focused on getting there fast, mentally running through the steps, check pulse, use the defibrillator, administer epinephrine if needed. Our ambulance screeched to a halt in front of Cedar Hollow's massive stone gate, where a sign reading Cedar Hollow, a safe haven, gleamed like it was mocking us. Ethan hit the call button at the gate, waiting for the iron bars to swing open. No response. He pressed harder, voice tense. "EMS here. Heart attack case. Open the gate now." A gruff voice came through the speaker. "Provide the access code." Ethan froze, looking at me. "Access code. We're paramedics. Open the gate." The voice got colder. "No code, no entry. HOA rules." I felt my blood boil. Every second ticking by was a stab at Margaret's chances. I couldn't wait. I grabbed my medical bag, slung it over my shoulder, and yelled to Ethan, "Call command to get the gate open. I'm going in on foot." I sprinted toward the pedestrian gate a few meters away, heart pounding not just from running, but from the invisible clock in my head. House 124 was right there, a 2-story home with a black ribbon on the mailbox, a detail I only noticed later, a remnant of an old family loss. I knew time was running out. I reached the gate, a metal frame with a keypad and scanner, where Derek Holt stood blocking my path. He was about 45, wearing a black vest labeled HOA Security. His name tag glinted, right hand gripping a taser, left resting on a radio. I flashed my EMS badge, voice urgent but professional. "I'm a paramedic. Heart attack patient at 124. Let me through now." Derek glanced at my badge, my uniform with its red patch, the ambulance with flashing lights behind me. Then he said, voice flat like he was reading a script, "You don't have an access code. No one gets through without a code or keycard." I was stunned, unable to believe my ears. "Are you serious? Someone's dying in there. I don't have time. Call your manager or let me through." Derek stepped forward, hand tightening on the taser. "I'm the manager on duty. No code, no entry. Call your supervisor if you have a problem." I pointed at my badge, voice rising with anger and desperation. "I'm EMS. This is a life or death emergency. Step aside, or I'm going through." I moved forward, hand touching the gate, determined to push past. Then a deafening crack rang out. A jolt of electricity tore through my chest, sending me crashing onto the perfectly manicured grass. My medical bag flew from my hand, spilling bandages, a stethoscope, and syringes everywhere. My body convulsed uncontrollably, chest burning, eyes blurring with unstoppable tears. I tried to scream, to say something, but only a pained groan escaped, choked in my throat. Derek stood there, still clutching the taser. His face flickered between resolve and regret. "You were warned," he muttered, as if that could absolve him. The ambulance siren wailed in the distance behind me, but I lay motionless. Inside House 124, Margaret Foster was fighting for her life, and I, the only one who could help, was helpless, watching her chance slip away. Robert Foster knelt beside the wife he'd loved for over half a century, trembling as he tried to keep her alive. They had dreamed of a peaceful retirement in this idyllic community, but it was all stolen by the callous rules of the neighborhood's HOA. Margaret and Robert Foster had moved to Cedar Hollow 5 years ago, seeking a tranquil place to enjoy their retirement. They'd worked hard their whole lives, Margaret as an elementary school teacher, Robert as a railroad engineer. Now, they wanted quiet morning walks, days tending a small garden, and moments playing with their grandkids. Cedar Hollow, with its tree-lined streets and shimmering man-made lake, had been a dream come true. They loved evenings on their porch, sipping tea, reminiscing about old times. Their 25th anniversary trip to Myrtle Beach, teaching their eldest grandchild to ride a bike, or laughing over Margaret always beating Robert at crosswords. The black ribbon tied to their mailbox, which I only understood later, was in memory of their eldest daughter, lost a few years prior. A quiet wound, but proof of their resilience after loss. But Margaret had been quietly enduring chest pains for days. She brushed them off, thinking it was stress or age, not wanting to worry Robert. That morning, the pain hit like a freight train. She clutched her chest, gasping, and collapsed in the living room. Robert, panicked, grabbed the phone and dialed 911, voice shaking. "My wife. She's not breathing right. Please come now." The dispatcher calmed him, guiding him to try CPR, but Robert only vaguely recalled a class from years ago. He knelt beside Margaret, pressing her chest clumsily, whispering, "Hold on, Maggie. They're coming, I promise." Her lips were blue, eyes closed, but he didn't give up. The sound of sirens at the gate made his heart leap with hope. But minutes passed, and no one came. He glanced out the window, seeing flashing red lights, but no footsteps, no knock at the door. Outside, I, Sarah Mitchell, was still on the grass, body aching from Derek's taser shock. Ethan Carter, in the ambulance, was yelling into the radio to get command to open the gate, but Cedar Hollow's system was a sluggish nightmare. By the time Ethan ran over to pull me up, the iron gate creaked open, but it was too late. We rushed into House 124, 8 minutes after the 911 call, double the golden window to save a heart attack patient. I knelt beside Margaret, starting CPR, compressing her chest with all my remaining strength, but deep down, I knew it was futile. No pulse. Her eyes were vacant. I kept going, pumping oxygen, using the defibrillator, but no miracle came. The county coroner arrived 20 minutes later, pronouncing her dead at the scene, zipping up the body bag as Robert sat crumpled in a corner, sobbing. Robert felt his world collapse. That night, he sat silently in the living room, clutching a framed wedding photo, Margaret in her white dress, her smile radiant, as bright as the day they vowed forever. They'd imagined mornings strolling hand in hand around the lake, relaxed evenings on the porch with warm tea, years of ease after a hard life. But now, every plan, every dream, was a gaping, aching void. The grief soon gave way to rage when Robert learned the truth. A paramedic, who could have saved Margaret, was tossed for not having an access code to the community. "They killed her," he whispered, voice choking. "They killed my Maggie, over a damn rule." That weekend, Robert reached out to Olivia Grant, a renowned attorney known for pursuing wrongful death cases. He didn't care about money. What he craved was justice and a guarantee that no one else would endure the pain he was carrying. From a place once praised as a suburban paradise, Cedar Hollow became the epicenter of outrage and controversy. News spread fast through the community, sparking hundreds of questions, thousands of eyes turning to the neighborhood's leadership. A blurry video from a neighbor's porch camera began circulating online. Footage of me, Sarah Mitchell, screaming to be let in, followed by the sharp crack of the taser. Margaret Foster's death shook Cedar Hollow to its core. But to understand why a paramedic like me was met with violence while trying to save a life, we need to go back to the beginning, when Cedar Hollow stopped being a friendly community and became a cold fortress ruled by inhumane regulations. 10 years ago, Cedar Hollow was a typical suburban neighborhood in Raleigh, North Carolina. Oakline streets led to red brick homes where kids rode bikes, retirees walked dogs, and neighbors chatted over fences. The homeowners association existed, but it was just a group of volunteers organizing block parties, reminding residents to mow their lawns, or decorating for Christmas. HOA fees were $200 a year, enough to maintain the man-made lake and tennis courts. Residents like Margaret and Robert Foster, who moved in for retirement, loved the community's warmth. They attended potlucks, brought homemade cookies to share, and felt Cedar Hollow was where they belonged. Things changed after a series of minor incidents sparked panic. A group of teens spray-painted the tennis courts. A model home was robbed of some decor. A few mailboxes were smashed in a late-night prank. These incidents, though trivial, stirred fear, especially in Henry Vaughn, the HOA president. Henry, 68, a retired factory manager, bore a scar on his cheek from an assault in his youth in Philadelphia. That experience left him obsessed with security, viewing every stranger as a threat. When he moved to Cedar Hollow with his wife, he saw it as a safe haven from his past. But the petty thefts rekindled his fears, and he resolved to act. Henry convinced the HOA board that Cedar Hollow needed stronger protection. They fired the volunteer team, hired a private security firm, installed code scanning gates at the entrance, set up cameras on every corner, and employed uniformed guards to patrol constantly. HOA fees skyrocketed to $800 a year to cover the changes. Residents grumbled, but Henry, with a steely voice at HOA meetings, insisted, "We're not just protecting our homes, we're protecting our way of life." He used phrases like community standards and property values to justify it, and most residents, though reluctant, agreed. They didn't realize how far these rules would go. The new security system turned Cedar Hollow into a fortress. Every visitor, from friends to delivery drivers, had to scan a code or get guard approval. Delivery drivers often left packages at the gate when verification dragged on. Residents were issued electronic keycards, and anyone without, like unexpected guests, was flatly denied. Once, Robert Foster got a warning letter from the HOA for leaving his trash can out overnight. Margaret joked, "They're controlling our garbage now." But behind her smile, she worried about the HOA's growing power. Other residents felt the inconvenience but shrugged, thinking security was worth the hassle. Enforcing these rules was Derek Holt, the HOA guard who tossed me. Derek, 45, former supermarket security guard, carried insecurity from never making it into the police force. The Cedar Hollow job was his chance to feel important. He wore his pressed black vest, always carried a charged taser, and treated the gate like a battle line. Derek saw HOA rules as sacred, once bragging to coworkers about denying a pizza delivery driver for not having a resident's name on the order. "Rules are rules," he'd say, smirking. That mindset made him the worst person to be on duty the morning I arrived. The video of me, Sarah Mitchell, being tossed at the gate went viral on social media, thrusting the neighborhood into a storm of criticism. But to understand why a paramedic was treated like an intruder, we need to look at Derek Holt, the HOA guard who pulled the trigger without hesitation. Derek wasn't just a security guard. He was the product of a system obsessed with rules, empowered by an HOA board, led by Henry Vaughn, to wield excessive control. His actions cost Margaret Foster her chance at life and plunged Cedar Hollow into crisis. Derek Holt wasn't the type you'd expect to cause a tragedy. Stocky, with a buzz cut and a steely gaze, he looked more like a soldier than a guard for a suburban Raleigh neighborhood. But Derek had never been a soldier. He dreamed of being a cop, spending years training and studying law, but repeatedly failed the entrance exams. Taunts from coworkers at the supermarket, where he'd worked security, still stung. "You think you're a real cop?" When the private security firm hired him for Cedar Hollow, Derek saw it as a chance to reclaim his pride. He wore his HOA security vest like a badge, kept his taser charged, and treated the community gate like a front line to defend at all costs. To Derek, HOA rules were untouchable. The board, especially Henry Vaughn, had built a harsh security system after petty thefts scared residents. Derek was trained to screen every visitor, no exceptions, and he embraced the role with zeal. He bragged to coworkers about denying a delivery driver for not having a resident's name on a package. "Rules are rules," he'd say, smirking, like it was a victory. That mindset made him the worst person to be on duty the morning I arrived. He didn't see himself as a protector of lives, he was a protector of the gate, and in his world, the gate trumped everything. That morning, when I ran to the pedestrian gate, Flashing my EMS badge and begging Derek to let me through to save Margaret Foster, he stood like a statue. He looked at my badge, my uniform with its red patch, the ambulance with its blazing red lights, but in his mind, I was just someone without a code. "You don't have a code," he said, voice flat like a script. When I shouted that someone was dying, he stepped forward, hand gripping the taser, and declared, "I'm the manager on duty. No code, no entry." I pointed at my badge, voice shaking with anger. This is a life or death emergency. But to Derek, it wasn't about life or death, it was about compliance. When I tried to push past the gate, he fired the taser, and I collapsed onto the grass, helpless as Margaret's chance at life faded. When the porch camera video went viral, Derek became the focal point of outrage. He told investigators he was just following rules. "We've had break-ins," he justified, voice defensive. I was protecting the residents' safety. But Cedar Hollow residents didn't buy it. How could a uniformed paramedic, standing by an ambulance with flashing lights, be seen as a threat? Karen Ellis, a resident leading the pushback, called Derek's actions unforgivable. But some, like Frank Larson, a retired cop, defended him. "We need security." Maybe he thought she wasn't legit. The debate tore apart once close neighbors, turning them into adversaries. Meanwhile, Derek was suspended by the HOA, confined to his small apartment in a corner of the community while police investigated potential charges. Alone in his dim room, he wrestled with mixed feelings, insistence that he was right, but unease at the residents' fury. "They hired me to guard the gate," he muttered, as if that could erase the consequences. But the consequences were inescapable. After the incident, Cedar Hollow descended into chaos. Residents gathered in small clusters, from porches to corner coffee shops, whispering about the viral video. Footage of me, Sarah Mitchell, crumpled on the grass after the taser shock, my medical bag spilled, and my desperate plea struck a chord with thousands. The video, captured by a resident's porch camera, racked up tens of thousands of views in hours, with comments like, "This HOA is insane," "Tossing a paramedic," or "Dissolve this board." Local media pounced, splashing headlines like "HOA guard tosses paramedic," "Patient dies," across every news channel. Cedar Hollow, once a symbol of suburban perfection, became a public relations nightmare. Residents were deeply divided. One group, led by Karen Ellis, a retired teacher, formed a Save Cedar Hollow campaign, demanding the HOA board resign. Karen, with silver hair and a resolute voice, went door to door, collecting signatures for a petition. "We came here for peace, not to live in a prison," she said at a community meeting, voice trembling with anger. She shared how her son was once denied entry for forgetting his keycard, and now she feared her own family could be the next victim of these rules. Many residents agreed, especially older ones like Margaret, worried ambulances wouldn't reach them in time. But not everyone concurred. Frank Larson, a retired cop, defended Derek and the board. "We've had break-ins," he said at a morning coffee meetup, hands shaking around his mug. Without tight security, who knows what could happen? Maybe Derek thought she was a fake. Frank's words infuriated another resident, Tom Reynolds, a retired professor. "A fake? With an ambulance right there? Lights blazing? Come on, Frank, that's ridiculous." The argument spread, splitting once friendly neighbors. A single mom, Lisa Harper, voiced her fear at a meeting. "If my kid gets hurt, will an ambulance even get through? We can't live like this." Meanwhile, the HOA board, led by Henry Vaughn, went on the defensive. They held an emergency meeting in the community's posh clubhouse, with large windows overlooking the tennis courts and lake. Henry, with the scar on his cheek from a youthful assault, sat at the head of the table, jaw clenched. Ellen Brooks, a retired accountant, suggested pinning it all on Derek, calling his actions an individual mistake. "We didn't tell him to tase anyone," she said, voice shrill. But Paul Newman, a former lawyer, pushed back. "We hired him, and we set the rules. This is on us." Henry stayed silent, mind reeling. He built this system to feel safe, but now it was crumbling around him. Media pressure made things worse. Reporters camped outside the clubhouse, pointing cameras at residents passing by, asking questions like, "Did you know about the security rules? Do you think the board is responsible?" Most residents muttered no comment and hurried off, but the tension grew. A rumor spread that the security company might not have a license for tasers, enraging residents like Karen. "They gave him a taser without a license," she said at a gathering, voice shaking. "What else don't we know?" The board scrambled to verify the rumor, but the damage was done. If true, they could face legal penalties beyond Robert's lawsuit. By the weekend, Signs sprouted on Cedar Hollow's manicured lawns. Reform HOA now. Paramedics, not paperwork. Justice for Margaret. The signs, handwritten in black marker on whiteboards, were a declaration of war from residents who'd once let the board run unchecked. Cedar Hollow was no longer a peaceful fortress. It was a battleground, and the fight was just beginning. Robert's lawsuit, coupled with media pressure, was backing the HOA into a corner. Amid the public fury, Ethan Carter and I faced a quieter, more personal battle. While the spotlight swirled around the board's failures, few knew the toll of the electric shock we endured the day Margaret collapsed. Derek Holt's taser shot didn't just steal her final chance at life. It left us with lingering wounds, physical and emotional. But from that, we found new resolve to ensure this tragedy wouldn't be forgotten or twisted by power and silence. After the incident, I was taken to Raleigh Metro Hospital, where doctors diagnosed nerve damage from the taser. My right arm, where the current hit, ached with every movement, like fire under my skin. I was bandaged, prescribed painkillers, and told to take leave to recover. But the physical pain was nothing compared to what played in my head. Every night, I woke up, heart racing, seeing Derek looming over me with the taser. I saw his cold eyes, heard the deafening crack, and felt the helplessness as Margaret slipped beyond my reach. A paramedic who'd saved countless lives, was now trapped by the memory of the moment I failed. My doctor urged me to see a therapist, and I started sessions, admitting, I can't stop wondering if I'd been faster, stronger, would Margaret still be alive? Ethan Carter, my partner and close friend, wasn't spared the trauma. He was in the ambulance when I was tossed, screaming into the radio to get the gate opened. When he ran over to pull me up, he saw me convulsing on the grass. My medical bag spilled like a crime scene. Ethan blamed himself for not jumping out sooner, for not facing Derek with me. I should have been there with you, he said, voice low and rough, as we sat in the ambulance parking lot days later. We should have rammed the gate. I shook my head, trying to comfort him. You did your job. This isn't your fault. It's theirs. But I knew Ethan didn't believe me. He started taking extra shifts, burying himself in work to avoid thinking about it, but his eyes betrayed his torment. We decided to visit Robert Foster one evening, wanting to offer condolences and check on him. Robert greeted us at the door, shaking our hands with red-rimmed eyes. She was my everything, he said, voice breaking, leading us to the living room. On the table was a framed wedding photo of him and Margaret, her in a white dress, smile radiant. 50 years, and they took her over a damn gate code. Robert's pain cut into me like a knife. He pulled out a box of old HOA letters, notices of fee hikes, new security rules, even a warning for leaving his trash can out too long. Margaret always said we gave them too much power, he said, voice hardening. She was right. Those letters fueled our resolve, a reminder that this tragedy wasn't just Derek's fault but the system's. Robert shared that he'd hired Olivia Grant, a sharp attorney known for wrongful death cases. Olivia, with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing, saw this lawsuit as a chance to target not just Derek but the entire HOA board. This isn't just one guard, she told Robert. It's a system that puts rules over lives. We'll make them pay. Her words sparked hope in me. I couldn't let the tossing stop me from returning to work, couldn't let fear win. I can't let this define me, I told Ethan as we left Robert's house. I'm a paramedic. It's who I am. But recovery wasn't easy. Therapy helped me face the nightmares, but the nerve pain made it hard to lift my medical bag. My boss, supportive but cautious, assigned me light duties until I was ready. Ethan, the trying to stay strong, carried unshakable guilt. We knew, sooner or later, Robert's lawsuit would require our testimony, meaning reliving the horrific moment that changed everything. Meanwhile, the pressure from signs and media storms at Cedar Hollow weighed heavily on the HOA board. But for Ethan and me, the real confrontation with the past wasn't in the headlines, it was in the courtroom. Robert Foster's lawsuit, targeting the very board that created the callous rules contributing to Margaret's death, became a new front. Under Olivia Grant's lead, Robert's attorney, our pain was no longer just personal wounds but living evidence of a system that needed to change. This wasn't just a quest for justice for Margaret, it was how we reclaimed our voice and value for those once ignored. The lawsuit launched months after Margaret's death, when Olivia Grant, a sharp attorney with graying hair and eyes that missed no detail, filed a wrongful death suit against the Cedar Hollow HOA. The lengthy, scathing complaint accused the board, led by Henry Vaughn, of creating a militarized control environment that prioritized rules over lives, leading to Margaret's death. Olivia demanded $5 million in damages, plus punitive fines to send a message that no HOA could obstruct emergency services. She knew the case would hit the jury's emotions. Margaret was a beloved grandmother. I was a dedicated paramedic, and the HOA board looked like detached bureaucrats. Olivia prepared the case with terrifying precision. She interviewed witnesses, including a delivery driver once denied by Derek Holt for lacking a code, and a firefighter who'd struggled with Cedar Hollow's gate on a prior call. Crucially, she uncovered that the security company lacked a taser license, a detail that infuriated residents like Karen Ellis. Olivia met Ethan and me in her small Raleigh office, shelves packed with legal books and family photos. "Tell me everything," she said, pen hovering over her notepad. "Leave nothing out." I recounted that morning, the 911 call, the race to Cedar Hollow, my pleas to Derek, and the taser shock that floored me. "I told him someone was dying," I said, voice still shaking with anger. "He didn't care." Ethan added, voice tight. "I was in the rig, yelling into the radio to open the gate. When I ran over, Sarah was on the grass. I should have been there sooner." Olivia nodded, jotting notes. I sharp. "You're credible witnesses," she said. "The video will back your story. We'll make them pay." The trial unfolded in a packed Raleigh courtroom, with a jury of young professionals and retirees. Robert Foster sat in the plaintiff's row, eyes red but chin high. I wore my paramedic uniform, a reminder of my mission. Across the room, the HOA board, Henry Vaughn, Ellen Brooks, Paul Newman, and others, sat in gray suits, flanked by lawyers. The room's tension was palpable, a mix of grief and anger. Olivia opened with a powerful speech, painting a vivid picture of that fateful morning. Robert's desperate 911 call, my effort to save Margaret, and Derek's brutal act. "This wasn't an accident," she said, voice firm. "This was the inevitable result of a system that put rules above lives. The Cedar Hollow HOA turned a paramedic into a criminal, and a woman died for it." I took the stand first, voice steady but resolute. I described flashing my EMS badge, pointing to the ambulance, begging Derek. I told him we had a heart attack case. I said there was no time for codes. He tossed me anyway. The jury leaned in, eyes darkening as I described the taser's pain, the helplessness knowing Margaret was dying. Ethan went next, voice catching. "I saw Sarah on the grass, her medical bag spilled. We're trained to save lives, but we couldn't do anything if we're stopped at the gate." A medical expert testified next, explaining that with timely CPR, Margaret had a 40% chance of survival. By the time paramedics arrived after 8 minutes, he said, that chance was 0. His words landed like a punch, clarifying the cost of those stolen minutes. Then came Derek Holt. He looked smaller on the stand, a cheap suit replacing his security vest. Voice trembling, he tried to explain. "I was just following rules. The HOA was strict, no exceptions, even for EMS. I thought I was doing right." Olivia cross-examined relentlessly. "You saw a uniformed paramedic, an ambulance with flashing lights, and still thought she was a threat?" Derek stammered. I was just following orders." The phrase hung, a weak excuse. Henry Vaughn took the stand next, voice shaky as he tried to defend the security system. "We had break-ins," he said, his cheek scar twitching. "We wanted residents safe." Olivia didn't hold back. "Did you ever consider that emergency services need immediate access?" Henry hesitated. "We had a system. Guards had to verify." Olivia struck. "And you hired Derek Holt, gave him a taser, told him to enforce rules without exception, correct?" Henry went silent, mouth dry. "We told them to use common sense," he mumbled, but the words lacked conviction. The HOA's defense lawyers tried to pin it on Derek, arguing he acted outside policy. "We didn't authorize force against EMS," they said. But Olivia countered with a searing argument. This wasn't one rogue guard. This was the inevitable outcome of a fortress mentality you created, where paramedics are seen as threats. She held up the HOA's security flowchart, pointing out the bureaucratic layers, access codes, gate scanners, guard verification. When do rules become so rigid they take lives? She asked the jury, voice ringing through the room. The jury deliberated for 2 days, 2 tense, breathless days that left every heart on edge. Outside the courthouse, Cedar Hollow residents kept rallying, holding signs like "Justice for Margaret" and "Paramedics, not paperwork," as a community's awakened voice. Finally, the verdict came. The jury foreperson stood, voice clear across the courtroom. "We find in favor of the plaintiff, Robert Foster, and hold the Cedar Hollow Homeowners Association liable for wrongful death due to negligence and obstructive security policies. The jury awarded $4 million in damages, a heavy indictment of the system the HOA had prided itself on. The courtroom erupted with gasps and choked whispers. Robert Foster closed his eyes, tears streaming, clutching a small framed photo of Margaret. Olivia Grant rested a hand on his shoulder, her eyes a mix of triumph and deep empathy. Across from them, the HOA board, Henry Vaughn, Ellen Brooks, Paul Newman, sat frozen. Faces pale, eyes vacant. Henry, who'd built the strict security system believing it would protect the community, now bowed his head in silence. He thought he was right. But now, facing undeniable truth, he knew the rules he created helped cause a tragedy and dragged Cedar Hollow into an abyss. For Ethan and me, that moment was a turning point. We didn't just witness justice served. We felt a piece of our wounds begin to heal. But though the courtroom closed, the journey ahead remained long because changing a community takes more than a verdict. It takes forgiveness, truth, and a promise to never let this happen again. The fallout came swiftly. Facing a massive debt, the Cedar Hollow HOA teetered on bankruptcy. The board considered dissolving or fully restructuring, but both options required raising resident fees or selling community assets like the clubhouse and tennis courts. Residents, already furious, grew angrier at the idea of paying more to fix the board's mistakes. Signs like "Reform HOA Now" and "Justice for Margaret" still stood tall on lawns, now joined by new ones. No more fees. Karen Ellis, leading the resistance, held community meetings, calling for a new board election. "We can't let them keep destroying this neighborhood," she said, voice fierce. Henry Vaughn, once a symbol of HOA authority, resigned under pressure. The scar on his cheek, a mark from a youthful assault, seemed more pronounced as he left the clubhouse for the last time, eyes avoiding reporters waiting outside. Ellen Brooks and Paul Newman, two other board members, also left Cedar Hollow, selling their homes and moving elsewhere, unable to bear the neighbors' scorn. Remaining members tried to apologize, promising reform, but trust was shattered. Residents like Tom Reynolds, once silent, now spoke up. They had their chance. "It's time we take back this neighborhood." Derek Holt, the guard who tossed me, faced his own reckoning. Suspended with pay since the incident, he lived in isolation in a small apartment in a corner of Cedar Hollow. Police investigated potential charges for unlawful use of force, especially after learning the security company lacked a taser license. Derek, once adamant he was just following rules, began to waver. Alone, he scrolled through scathing online comments, from murderer to heartless robot. Though he tried to justify, "I was protecting residents," he couldn't shake the image of me collapsing on the grass or the thought that Margaret died because of him. The isolation and pressure made him slowly realize the rules he worshipped had betrayed him. Meanwhile, the Cedar Hollow community began to transform. Residents, from Karen to those once pro-security like Frank Larson, agreed the old system had to go. They held meetings to discuss a new security model, prioritizing people over rules. One proposal gained traction: automatic gate opening for ambulances and a direct hotline to the EMS station. "If an ambulance comes, they get in. No questions," Karen said at a meeting, earning loud applause. Robert Foster, still steeped in grief, found purpose in the verdict. He didn't want the damages for himself. He wanted them to prevent future tragedies. He began planning to use part of the money to create a scholarship fund in Margaret's name, supporting medical students like me. "Maggie would have wanted that," he told Olivia, voice catching. "She always wanted to help others." He kept a small photo of Margaret in his wallet, pulling it out when the sorrow grew too heavy. "Don't let rules override common sense," he told every reporter who asked, voice raw. "That's all I want people to take from this." The Cedar Hollow lawsuit became a catalyst for change beyond the neighborhood. HOAs nationwide, from Florida to California, began reviewing security policies, fearing a repeat. Several states proposed bills requiring gated communities to ensure immediate ambulance access. The phrase "Justice for Margaret" became a rallying cry for HOA reform advocates, appearing on social media and fundraisers. Articles continued to warn of overzealous HOAs, carrying Margaret's story far beyond Raleigh. Cedar Hollow began to heal. Protest signs gave way to flower beds and American flags. Residents, once letting the HOA control everything, now attended meetings, voiced concerns, and rebuilt trust. Older residents, many shaken by Margaret's death, found new purpose in ensuring no repeat tragedy. "We're a community, not a fortress," Tom Reynolds said at a block party, raising a lemonade glass. Let's keep it that way. For Robert, healing was slower. He'd lost the love of his life, but found solace in the scholarship fund, the changes at Cedar Hollow, and the belief that Margaret's death saved others. He kept her wedding photo on the mantle, whispering nightly, "I miss you every day, Maggie. But I'm making your story matter." The story of Cedar Hollow reflects a broader issue in today's American culture, where homeowners associations often impose rigid rules with severe consequences. The incident of Sarah Mitchell being tossed by Derek Holt for lacking an access code, leading to Margaret Foster's death, exposes the danger of prioritizing rules over compassion and common sense. In modern America, many neighborhoods, especially in cities like Raleigh, are governed by HOAs aiming to protect property values and security, but creating bureaucratic environments that hinder essential services like ambulances. Derek's actions, driven by a system built by Henry Vaughan, reflect a fear-driven, over-controlling mindset common in communities obsessed with crime despite low actual rates. The resident divide, from Karen Ellis demanding reform to Frank Larson defending security, mirrors current societal tensions between individual freedom and collective rules. The $4 million verdict and Robert Foster's scholarship fund underscore the power of legal action and compassion in righting wrongs. Put people over rules. In real life, each of us should examine the regulations, from HOAs to workplaces, and ask if they serve the common good or just entrench power. If you live in an HOA community, attend meetings, like Cedar Hollow's residents, to ensure rules don't block emergency services. Learn from Robert, turning pain into positive action, like fundraising or advocating for local reform. Finally, like Sarah and Ethan, don't let fear or failure stop you from doing what's right. In an increasingly polarized society, compassion and common sense, as Cedar Hollow learned, are the keys to building a truly safe community. Thanks for watching the story of Cedar Hollow and Margaret's fight for justice. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join us in the next video for more HOA nightmares.